Welcome to Virtual Worship with the Table, United Church of Christ of Mesa. I'm Pastor Kelly, and it is great to gather with you here online to worship God in community. So I usually record outside, and I've heard a number of you even say like, hey, I love the experience of kind of seeing some spacious places, especially as we're quarantined. So I do apologize for not really finding a space on this 4th of July weekend that is outside, that is accessible enough to record and quiet enough to be able to hear and record well. So we're in my office today, and if you haven't been in my office before, welcome. Today we'll be reflecting on words from the prophet Zechariah in which God invited the Israelites to consider what real freedom feels like, what it might be like to create a more just and compassionate common life together after their own experience of disorientation and disaster. So some of that might be relevant to what we're encountering in our own common life together today. I don't know, maybe. So we'll have an opportunity to reflect on that, and then we'll also have the opportunity to be in conversation with one another about that at 11:15 today at a special meeting of the Service and Social Justice Ministry team. They're inviting all of our church, all who are interested, to come join some small group Zoom conversations on racial justice and some next action steps to make anti-racism work a significant part of our church's mission and ministry. So that's at 11:15, and if you'd like to come, there is a link in your e-news. And if you don't have the e-news, then you can email me, kryan@tableucc.com, and I'll make sure that you get a link before 11:15 today. So right now, I invite you to grab some communion elements. This is our communion Sunday, first Sunday of every month. So grab some kind of bread, some kind of carb, and some sort of beverage. Grab a candle. And know that we are all connected through God's grace, even as we are physically separate. We're gathering here together now. And let us prepare our hearts and our minds for worship. Hey guys, it's Pastor Kelly, and you're probably seeing this the morning after the 4th of July. And I know the 4th of July is a holiday that we often look forward to a lot. And I mean, you can hear our neighbors, they're having a pool party. And I'm thinking that Jason and I are going to be able to see fireworks from our house. And I know growing up, I was really used to going to see fireworks like at big gatherings with lots of people. And it was always really fun. And we're not going to have that in the same way this year. But even if we're not having things the same way as usual, the fireworks are still going to be there. So I'm walking up our stairs. We've got some little steps in our backyard. And Jason and I were thinking that we might be able to see the fireworks here in our town from this little raised spot in our backyard. So it looks kind of like this. You might be able to see something. We'll see. But it's got me thinking about how we look for things that are still little moments of joy, things that make us really happy, things that make us feel kind of like some really big joy in our hearts, even when things feel hard or weird. Something like fireworks, even during a pandemic. And not that everybody's gathering in person, but that somebody's still going to shoot them off. And you can still look up to the sky. Maybe. I don't know, it hasn't happened yet as I'm recording this. But we're hoping that we can see these fireworks. And you look up to the sky, and there's still something really beautiful and something that still makes us feel kind of happy and like there's still wonder in our lives. And I think that can be a way that I think about God right now, that even the times we feel sad, God is still there. And if we look closely, if we get to a place where we can see things a little better, we can see that wonder that is God. And for those times we feel angry or frustrated, we can get a different angle on things, a different perspective. And then we can still see that joy and that kind of big-heartedness that I think is what God's presence feels like. So I hope you guys had a good weekend. And I hope that whatever feels hard these days, that there's still a chance where you can move to a different place. However you find that. You can find a different way to look at things. And that you might be able to see God still always right with us, but maybe seen in a new way. So I hope you guys are doing well. I hope something awesome happened to you this week, and I hope you've got something awesome coming up next week. And I love you, and I miss you. Bye.
Today's reading is from the book of Zechariah, chapter 9, verses 9 through 12. Rejoice greatly, O daughter Zion. Shout aloud, O daughter Jerusalem. Lo, your king comes to you. Triumphant and victorious is he, humble and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. He will cut off the chariot from Ephraim, and the war horse from Jerusalem, and the battle bow shall be cut off. And he shall command peace to the nations. His dominion shall be from sea to sea, and from the river to the ends of the earth. As for you also, because of the blood of my covenant with you, I will set your prisoners free from the waterless pit. Return to your stronghold, O prisoners of hope. Today I declare that I will restore to you double.
There's a lot of longing for the way things were in this text. This text comes from the other side of the exile of the Israelites in Babylon. It was an exile for generations, and they lived amid this long, unfolding disaster. And I imagine they knew the tentative, hopeful conversations about when things might go back to normal, and then the disappointment of when that didn't work out. I imagine they knew that kind of simmering dread of not knowing or being in control of what will affect your life next, what you might grieve next. And I think the Israelites spoke of the before times the way we do. But this text, it looks back at some of the before times for the Israelites, but God is more focused on what comes in the future on the other side of that long unfolding disaster that was their exile. It's looking at whatever's next. And they didn't necessarily know what that was going to be, but God spoke through prophets to help them imagine what it could be like. And so God is saying to the Israelites through this prophet, Zechariah, I know it is so hard to rebuild on the other side of generations of disaster. And I know, yes, that there were some things in Babylon that you might remember felt easier or were more comfortable. But you weren't truly free, and you couldn't be everything that I hope that you could be. God says, yes, I can see how my children, as you are returning to your lands, that it can feel discouraging and overwhelming to return, look around at what has been devastated, and contemplate rebuilding. But I want to remind you how good this common life shaped by my vision could be, and how truly good liberation can feel. Imagine welcoming leadership that is good and humble, with a particular care for the poor and oppressed. Imagine finally breaking the weapons of violence and war. Imagine finally creating systems of real peace that a prophet later once spoke was not the absence of tension, but is the presence of justice, that kind of peace. In the chapters leading up to this text, God is highlighting, the failures of past generations of the Israelites in hope that the new generation who are returning from exile will turn and go a different way, to live differently with the true presence of justice. And God is asking them, think about it. Have you had a system that imprisons people unjustly, leaving them in the deadly equivalent of a pit without any water? Have you had a system that left people crying out for basic needs, crying out for the things that sustain life that were afforded more to some than to others? Have you had a system that thinks that more war will enable you to live peacefully? I want you to reckon honestly with who you've been, and then I want you to imagine what you could be. And when you reflect on what has been lost in unprecedented disaster, and you're ready to rebuild, would you really recreate that common life together with all of those injustices still in the mix? Or would you take the opportunity to use all of the wisdom and compassion that you know now and recreate a community that is truly just and truly peaceful, where people can know, maybe for the first time really, the sweetness of true liberation, where there is a sense of ease, of joyful life and safety for all people? Wouldn't you want to build that way? And so we too, in our day, are in a place where we're in the midst of a disaster that is quaking the foundations of our common life together. And that means we can let this crisis be an opportunity. And we can consider, how do we restructure ourselves and rebuild those things that are crumbling so that our common life is just and peaceful? There's this beautiful line of encouragement to prisoners of hope. There's this restoration that was hoped for in that day. And in a lot of the kind of base level of the imagination of the hearers of the prophet Zechariah at this time, that would have looked like having a king in the Davidic line again, and being independent of all of those empires in the Near East that kept colonizing them. And God is like, yeah, I hear that longing. It would be nice to go back. It'd be nice to return to the good old days, or at least the highlights of how you remember it. But I hope for something so much better for you. You are my people, and you know the stories of real freedom, of exodus, and yes, of wilderness, which was not easy and was certainly not always comfortable. But when you know real liberation on the other side of wilderness, you know it can be so good. God invited the Israelites then, if you're going to rebuild your whole common life together again, do it better than before, with all the wisdom and compassion and frameworks for justice that you know now spoken through my prophets, so that there is space for all people to thrive. And I believe that in our day too, many of us are waking up to where justice has been absent, are listening to the voices who have been saying this for a very, very long time, in ways where the distractions have fallen away and we can hear it now. And I think we're waking up to how cruel the foundations of how our country was formed are. That the bricks the United States was built on were often violent. That it was built on the backs of kidnapped and brutalized people to extract free labor upon which to build our economy. That it was carved out of land that had never been a commodity until settlers decided it would be, and drove the inhabitants of that land from it, slaughtering the people who had long stewarded this land. This pandemic and our country's response to it at the highest levels has created a crisis that will change us forever. But I hope as we are still in this wilderness time that we can listen to the dreams and visions for better ways as best as we can. And that whenever we get to a steady enough place where we can reconstruct our life together, I hope we rebuild it with greater justice and true fullness of life for all people. I think of that Langston Hughes poem, Let America Be America Again, and I want to share just a little bit of it. I encourage you to look up the whole poem, but just a little snippet of this. He says, let America be the dream the dreamers dreamed. Let it be that great strong land of love where never kings connive nor tyrants scheme, that any man be crushed by one above. It never was America to me. Oh, let my land be a land where liberty is crowned with no false patriotic wreath, but opportunity is real, and life is free. Equality is in the air we breathe. There's never been equality for me, nor freedom in this homeland of the free. And he ends saying, Oh yes, say it plain. America never was America to me, and yet I swear this oath. America will be. The vision of a land that is truly free is not true yet. It is, in language that I heard this weekend in Hamilton, I liked a lot, it is an unfinished symphony. So let us continue pulling back the veil together, revealing the crumbling systems underneath, and let us keep a vision before us of a world so irresistibly good and free, we can't not fight to bring it about. I think we've had, to some degree, to numb ourselves as Americans to the pain that is in the foundations of our culture. For so long, we've shopped, we've drank, we've ate, we've consumed, we have been entertained, and for a long time, it has been easy to be distracted from that pain that's underneath. We don't have these distractions as much these days. And so people, as we're seeing, are waking up. There is great inequity and injustice, and many have been able to ignore the cries for a liberation that hasn't materialized yet. And so imagine now if the way we understand freedom isn't like being able to do whatever you want whenever you want to, but what if freedom is the presence of real justice, of systems that allow for true fullness of life? What if freedom is that which de-centers those who have the most power, and so then there's room for every person and everybody who's had all this tension of like this role that they've played in our culture can breathe freely, finally. No more posturing or jockeying for position. And so then restoring the humanity of all of us in the process. This true liberation can feel irresistibly good because we can be honest and present with our lives and even proud of who we are together in a way that maybe we've never been before. And so perhaps as we reflect on freedom this weekend, let freedom ring, but not for just what has been. But let freedom ring out a call to beloved community rebuilt together. Let freedom ring out, releasing oppressed and oppressor alike. Let freedom ring out that great, strong land of love like we've never known it before. And let freedom ring out with a clarity so irresistibly good, we're finally, truly proud. Amen. And so now we come to the time where we set our communion table with our prayers. And I've been aware in the last couple of weeks that we've reached over the 100-day mark in quarantine, in living with this pandemic. And I think many of us, I know I have experienced this to be a whole lot of different emotions, kind of up and down. Some days it might feel like things are more or less fine. Maybe it doesn't even feel that different. Some days it might feel like you can't imagine how you can keep on living this way. And maybe wonder if you can make it through much longer. And I'm particularly aware of how this week and this weekend might be feeling, as in our area, cases are back on the rise again. It had felt like things might open up, that we might be not done, but at least coming to the downside of the curve. And that's not the way things are right now. So I just wanted to invites some time for us to slow down, to catch up with ourselves and our hearts a little bit. So I just want to invite you to really feel your weight resting on the chair or whatever is supporting you right now. Noticing what sounds are in the background, what sounds you're hearing right now. Looking around and seeing exactly where you are in your space right now. Seeing if there are any smells or anything else that you might feel, any particular textures around you. Noticing what the air on your skin feels like. Maybe it's cool, maybe it's warm and dry. And breathing in deep and releasing it with a sigh. And bringing to your awareness that even though we're not in the same room together, that you're watching this with another, 35 to 50 households who are all doing this together, who are noticing different things, different sensations, but we're all doing this together. And so holding on to that thread of connection, I want to invite you to name, either in your heart, or you can type it into the chat bar here on YouTube, those prayers of concern that have been on your heart this week. People and places that might feel a bit more broken, that are hurting, that are disconnected, that are needing an extra bit of God's love and comfort and peace right now. And as we hold these in our hearts or here in the chat bar, we can respond by saying, God, hear our prayers. In a similar way, I also invite you to bring to your awareness those moments of surprise, of joy, those moments where there is still abundant grace, even when it feels like other things are scarce right now. Those places of joy in our lives, great or small, things that bring a smile to our lips and gratitude to our hearts. And so I invite you to put those in the chat bar as well right now. Holding the good and the bad of our lives all wrapped up together. Knowing that we are holding these still together. And I invite you to also respond either in your heart or in the chat bar with hallelujah for all of the good that remains. And so I'm aware that during this time, it may feel like our haul is a little longer than we had initially hoped. And I'm mindful that when things were approaching particularly difficult point in Jesus' ministry, he didn't start rallying his disciples closer together and make sure that everyone had their task and their job to carry out in his ministry. He didn't delegate all these very precise things. He didn't ramp up the energy and the pace. He slowed them down. And he ate dinner with them. And so if you haven't already, I want to invite you to go grab some of your communion elements, whatever you have lying around the house, and know that we are all coming to our own tables together as one, even as we are apart. And so in that way, this meal is ordinary and extraordinary. And please join your hearts with me in prayer for these elements. Gracious God, pour out your Spirit on this bread and this cup, that they may be nourishment for our bodies and for our hearts, for our minds and our spirits. Let this grace, this outward sign of your grace, be amplified among one another, together even as we are apart. Amen. And so Jesus, when things felt hard, he didn't speed up the pace, he slowed it down. And he gathered with his friends in an upper room, and he took the bread, common loaf that they shared together, and he blessed it, and he broke it, and he gave it to them, saying, "Take this, all of you, and eat. This bread is like my body, broken for you. As often as you eat of this, remember me, and remember who we are together." And in a similar way, at the end of the meal, he took the cup, the common cup that they shared together, and he blessed it, and he gave it to them, saying, "Take this, all of you, and drink. This cup is like my blood, in that it ratifies a new covenant, a new way of being in community together. As often as you drink of this, remember me." Beloveds, this table that we all gather in our own ways to is an open table. You don't have to make yourself right. You don't have to have the correct beliefs. You don't have to have precise bread and, fruit of a grape juice vine. We're coming with what we have, but the point is that we are coming together as one in this practice that Christians have been doing for millenniums and will long after we're gone. This is a meal of unity. This is a meal of liberation. This is a meal of grace, freely given for all. So come, all things are ready. And and will you join your hearts with me in this prayer of thanksgiving? Gracious and loving God, we thank you for the ways you continue to meet us where we are, where your grace enters into our lives, revealing that it was there all along. May this meal nourish our bodies, as well as our spirits, as well as our hearts, as well as our connections to one another. May it be the means of transformation in our hearts, and may that transformation of our hearts be the means of transformation in our world. In your Son, Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
There is a flow to God's Spirit, a flow of joy and love and hope that opens our hearts and our hands to God and to one another. We now invite your giving. You can give to the church or to our Deacons Fund, which offers emergency financial assistance. Checks can be made out to UCCLM and mailed in, or you can give via the yellow PayPal button on our website. All good things come from God, pass through us, and we steward that goodness forth, keeping the flow ever moving along. Thank you for your generosity in this time.
And so now, beloveds, as you go forth from this time together, May we keep before us the vision of a great, strong land of love that shapes our common life together. And may we be part of the dreams for bringing that about. So go in peace. Hold fast to that which is good. And may you be well.